It's a huge game week for wildcarders and non-wildcarders alike, so let's get set up for game week 35 in FPL. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and today I'm here to help you get set up with my team selection for game week 35. Now, game week 34 is something that we probably should talk about first. I was on a free hit, so I got 111 points, and overall, I probably shouldn't be complaining. It was obviously a green arrow. I'm up just outside the top 100k now. At one point, I think I was about 75, 76k based on live results, but obviously things started to go against me as well. Now, 111 points on a free hit this week actually weirdly wasn't one of the better scores. It was very average for a free hit. So if you're one of those managers who had a massive free hit score, please do let me know what you managed to get to in the comments below. And I promise I won't get too jealous. Now, for me, it was a story of missed opportunities, I think. Now, I did have Arsenal double defence. Obviously, 4 clean sheets between the two of them, but no Ben White goals, so I missed out on that haul, sadly. Then in midfield, I did annoyingly pick Luis Diaz with Mo Salah. Captain Salah got no returns from either of them, so it is fair to say I definitely had the wrong Liverpool triple up. And obviously, again, in defence, I have Van Dijk over the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold, for instance. Now, again, I didn't have, because I had double Arsenal defence and not Ben White, I also didn't have a space for the likes of Ødegaard or Havertz, both of which went pretty big. So I missed out on them as well. And then I also missed out on players like Michael Olise. Obviously, Phil Foden was unlikely to be included on a free hit, but if you're a non-free hitter out there with him, he's obviously come in clutch as well last night. And of course, we also have the likes of Bruno Fernandes as well, who went big with a single game week. And obviously a good single game week fixture, and maybe could have been arguably on a free hit for a few managers, but not many would have included him. Now, up front was where the points were recovered a little bit. Mateta, 29 points, one of the all-time great double game week performances. 4 goals across the double, bonus points in each of them. I actually went and saw Crystal Palace live for the 5-2 against West Ham, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. I couldn't believe my luck when I saw Mateta get that second goal. And obviously I had Eze as well, who hauled in that game too. So that was a very good day. It all kind of got a bit muted since that point as well, because 111 realistically isn't a massive score. I was really hoping to go big this week. I did say before the game week that if I wasn't able to get within the top 100k in game week 34, I would call it a relative failure. Obviously, I got pretty close, but I don't think it's big enough to really propel me to the rank that I want to get to this season. So maybe that's going to inform my decision making in this video and moving forwards, because I'm probably more willing to take a few risks now. Getting a top 100k finish is going to be a big priority for me. That's not a million miles off. But also, I kind of want to see how far I can get. Can I risk it and get to a 50k or a 25k by taking a few gambles or taking a few hits here and there to try and chase the upside in the back 4 weeks? Again, let me know in the comments below what you think of that strategy. But in the meantime, let's get set up for game week 35. And maybe first of all, let's take a look at what I would do if I was wildcarding this week. So of course, this is not a game week 35 wildcard video. I'm not on a wildcard this week, but since so many of you are, I thought it would be helpful to quickly show what I would do if I was on a wildcard. I'm not going to run through each of these picks strategically too much because it would just take a whole video. But this is the 15 I'd actually be pretty confident that I'd pick right now. Now, that front 8, I think, are completely locked. The only arguable player that I'd have in front of any of these 8, or especially the midfielders, would be Kevin De Bruyne. Now, he's looked really good recently, and he will be a really good differential. But with this structure, I don't really see a way to fit him in without sacrificing elsewhere. This draft has 0.7 in the bank. Most of you should be able to afford it. I don't have fantastic team value. I think I'm around 105 million. So 0.7 in the bank, most people should be able to afford this team. Now, in the front 8, I think that's a strong blend. You've got double Newcastle attack for good fixtures and then double game week in 37. Bruno Fernandes has been fantastic. We'll come on to him in just a moment's time. again, a pretty easy pick right now. Palmer and Son are auto picks right now as well, because as long as they're both fit for game week 35, again, we'll come on to that in a minute, they are just almost essential to have at this point. That front three kind of picks itself. Haaland's a doubt, but with Foden first on the bench, that is an incredible first option on the bench. All that needs to happen is Haaland to miss out, and Foden can come in anyway. And to be honest, Foden could just start. I'm not sure who I'd start him over in this situation. Maybe you just have to make peace with having a very, very strong first bench. But he's likely to come on anyway for Haaland if he's unfit and obviously doesn't get any minutes. So I think that's absolutely fine. And from this point onwards, you start Foden. And you're setting up for a bench boost in 37, remember. So you're spreading the funds. You're not including the likes of Mo Salah. So you do have a bit more money to spread around and build a strong 15. What comes with that is benching headaches every single week. And as you can see here, you've got the likes of Gabriel, Gvardiol and Onana all on the bench. Yes, okay, Onana's probably not going to be an option to start most weeks, but he does have a double in game week 37. And if it wasn't for Petrovic's double game week this week, Burnley at home is a good fixture, so it would have been tough to bench him otherwise. Now, the problem may come with the defence this week. I think a lot of wildcard videos and a lot of people on a wildcard will have noticed that defensive picks are not easy to select on a wildcard this week. There are a few injuries going around, and to be quite frank, there are just not that many clean sheets in FPL at the moment. But I would be pretty set on this 5. Now, the reason for that is each of these players also contains attacking upside and are pretty much locked in, barring maybe one of the picks, for every single game between now and the end of the season. Now, Dalot would probably be the weak point here, but he does have decent attacking upside, and Man United have good enough fixtures that I'd be okay with including him. It does mean that there's a double Man United defence there, obviously with Onana, but to be quite frank, I'm not really thinking of playing more than one of them at any given moment, other than in game week 37, when they double. So that's not really a problem for me. Either Onana or Dalot gets benched in 35, 36, and 38 in this plan. So I'm okay including Dalot and basically only having one starter between the Man United assets each week. Outside of that, Porro is a risk, but it looks like he should be fit to start. Again, I'll come on to that later. And obviously, with 2 double game weeks between now and the end of the season, I think it's probably good enough to include on a wildcard, especially with the attacking upside. Fabian Schär as well would be my preferred Newcastle asset. I would also recommend Dan Burn if you're a bit stretched for money, but I do really like Schär. I like his attacking upside. He's usually good for a goal, and again, Newcastle have looked much better recently, barring that Crystal Palace result, which came as a bit of a shock. Outside of that, Gvardiol would be the risk, maybe, and I think including a Man City defender is probably a good idea, but none of them feel that nailed. Walker is probably the one that maybe if you want to go one step more nailed than Gvardiol, then you could go for, but even he has been rotated at times this season, and Gvardiol has decent attacking upside. I'd probably chance my arm on him at this moment in time. Ruben Diaz got rotated last night, so again, it proves that he's not locked. Even players like Akanji, Ake, they're not completely nailed. So it is a bit of a roll of the dice. My role would be on Gvardiol at the moment, but it is a risk, and I wouldn't have any problems whatsoever with going with the likes of Walker instead. Gabriel will be the only single game week player come game week 37. You could even look at using one of your free transfers to take him out, but Arsenal have just been so good at the back. I was actually quite tempted to include double Arsenal defence on this wildcard. That's how good they've been, even without having a double game week between now and the end of the season. I think they've just been that fantastic at the back that it's actually not a bad idea to include them. And Gabriel would be an absolute must pick on a wildcard for me personally anyway. So sadly, it's time to come crashing back down to earth after looking at what I would consider to be the perfect 15 for game week 35. I now look at my team and it's not that close at the moment. It's quite frustrating, really, especially when you see all of those flags as well. I've now got 5 flagged players after wildcarding just a few game weeks ago. I think I have been relatively unfortunate, but it is a risk that I took by wildcarding early, so I really shouldn't be complaining too much. And injuries happen, right? Even those on Wildcard in 35 will probably have an injury or two to deal with by the time we get to the bench boost in 37. It's just one of the facts of life and the facts of FPL. So I'm going to see if I can navigate it. Obviously, I've only got one free transfer though, so a hit is looking pretty likely as it stands. Now, I think looking at my 15 at the moment, I can probably put out a decent enough starting 11 this week, but I do also need to start looking at the bench and figuring out a way to get rid of them ahead of game week 37. And it's trying to find the opportune moment to do so that also gives me upside whilst taking the hits. So at the moment in my 15, I think Petrovic to start over Onana. Already discussed that in the wildcard section. It's just the fact he has a double game week. And if Man United were any better at the back, I'd be tempted to include Onana over Petrovic because of the really nice looking home fixture there. But Man United just aren't keeping that many clean sheets at the moment. So even against Burnley, I'm thinking it's not a great shout of a clean sheet. So therefore, I probably just back the double game week. Moving into defence, Gusto, Udogie and Lascelles are all flagged. Gusto looks like he's in light training at the moment. Apparently that is away from the squad and he's hopeful to be ready by game week 36. Now, obviously, that's not going to be fantastic news for me because I need him for game week 35 for the double. Now, if that is true, if that is the case, we might get a word from Pochettino today in the press conferences after I record this, and he might be okay. But I think it is another player that's a bit of a risk, and if he's a risk, I've only got 2 fit starting defenders, one of which is Gabriel away at Tottenham. So I probably do need to make a defensive transfer no matter what. And I've only got 1 fit Spurs player as well, so I'll come on to that later. But it looks like Udogie to another Spurs player like Porro could be an interesting option, although there are others to consider. Now, moving into midfield, on paper, it's not a bad-looking midfield. I think Mo Salah's the standout at the moment with West Ham away, good fixture, but he is admittedly just not in good form at the moment, and he's taking up a lot of budget that I could shift elsewhere pretty easily. And also, it'd just be really helpful to have that money spare to use elsewhere with transfers between 36 and 37, rather than pushing the transfer down the line, because obviously he doesn't have that double game week in game week 37. Having that money now so I can start making upgrades immediately. And also there are a few players that are in really good form in midfield with double game weeks coming, with really good fixtures now that I could make the switch for. He's also getting sold by a lot of managers on a wild card and even just with managers like me with transfers. So his effective ownership will come down. I think with Salah though, I'll come on to it again in just a moment's time, but there are disadvantages to selling him as well. So I don't want to get ahead of myself. Overall, this 15 is not looking too healthy right now. Palmer, I think, is yellow flagged, but he's back in training, so hopefully he's not going to be a problem. But generally speaking, moves need to be made, right? And let's not waste any more time. Let's start having a look at, first of all, captaincy as well, but also then the transfers that I'm potentially looking at making, probably, most likely, in defence and midfield. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the captaincy matrix for game week 35. And if Palmer's fit, it seems like a fairly simple decision for a lot of managers this week. He will be very high owned. I imagine his effective ownership will probably be up near 200%. There'll be a few triple captainers around, and as long as he is fit, he'll be a very, very popular pick. And it's clear to see why as well. Really good underlying data, 0.89 XGI per 90, 30 attacking returns in 23 starts now, I believe, and a 200-point club member already with game weeks to go. So a very strong season from Palmer. He's been phenomenal all year long. And defensively, the double up isn't that bad either. Aston Villa are okay at the back, of course, but Tottenham do leak goals too. So generally speaking, I expect Palmer, as long as he starts both matches, to be the best pick. But I think it is worth noting that he has had the illness in midweek, so maybe there's reduced minutes. Maybe he doesn't start the first of the 2 games, although I think that's very unlikely at this point, and we should get confirmation from Pochettino that he's fit before the deadline. If there is a worst case scenario and for whatever reason he's had a setback, doesn't start the first game, or we hear from Poch that he's not fit and ready, then probably the next best option is looking like Son Heung-min. Now, obviously not as good data, but still very good. 0.58 is great. and it's also a player on penalties as well. So good 90-minute man. Arsenal and Chelsea. Now, Arsenal's not a great fixture, which is probably what puts him significantly below Palmer in the captaincy matrix. But still, he's had a very good season. He's a quality player. We know how good he is as a finisher. So if Palmer isn't fit for whatever reason, Son is probably a good second option. If you wanted to be differential and you're really trying to rank chase at this point, there's probably one of three options. My favourite is on the sheet right now. That would be Isak at home to Sheffield United. Now, obviously, Newcastle battered them earlier on this season. Isak has been in phenomenal form. He's kind of chasing the golden boot at the moment as well. And 0.87 XGI per 90 is sensational for a striker. That's one of the best in the game. So very, very happy. If it was all a single game week, he would be probably one of the top contenders for captaincy. It's just the fact that Palmer and Son have a double game week that probably puts them ahead of him. Bruno Fernandes as well, Burnley at home. He's been in sensational form, back-to-back double-digit figures rather. And of course has Burnley at home in this game week as well. So he's a good differential shout. And then finally, if you really, really wanted to push it, I guess you could look at Nicholas Jackson for the double game week for Chelsea as well. Although if you're looking at Jackson, you probably might as well just look at Palmer, who has better data on penalties and has just been a much, much more prolific FPL asset this season. Obviously, if there's the injury doubt, if there's the illness doubt, then maybe you could look at Jackson instead. But generally speaking, I think it would probably lie on one of these three players. For me, it's Palmer number one, clearly. And then if he's out, it probably moves down to Son and then Isak. Right then, so let's take a look at some of my transfer options for Game Week 35. And it looks like two players need to go. Between now and Game Week 37, I definitely need to get rid of both Lascelles and Udogie. It's just a matter of when is the right moment to do so. And to be honest, there's an argument to just do it now, do both of them right now, take the -4 on two defensive transfers, and bring in Shah and Porro. Now, also, Gvardiol has entered my thinking, or just a Man City asset has entered my thinking, rather, because they could be a good alternative in defence. But I think, for me, it's most likely that I'm picking between Shah and Porro, because, again, if Porro is fit, and we should hear that before the deadline, both of these players are very, very nailed for minutes. They've both got, well, Porro's got 2 double game weeks between now and the end of the season, and also has Burnley and Sheffield United to play as well. Yes, okay, overall, every single one of the other fixtures isn't looking particularly fantastic, but 6 games in just 4 game weeks is decent enough upside, and then it's an argument of whether or not that beats 5 game weeks for the likes of Fabian Schär, who has less attacking upside, more so on the goal threat though, and does have better games in his locker as well. So Sheffield United, Burnley, Brighton at home, Brentford away, and Man United away as well in the double with Brighton at home. That is a better set of fixtures than Tottenham's are, but obviously it's one less game and doesn't have the double game week in Game Week 35. So one of these two players I think is very likely to come in for me, and whichever one I pick, it's probably going to be their teammate who's injured that moves out. So Lascelles would go to Schär, or Udogie would go to Porro. I don't think I'm going to do both because, as I've mentioned, I do have 2 fit and starting defenders at the moment, Van Hecke and Gabriel. And whilst Gabriel away at Tottenham isn't ideal, I'm okay starting them, I think. And then Gusto, if he's not fit, Gabriel can come in for Gusto, for instance. Now, I think out of the 2 right now, I marginally prefer Porro for 2 reasons. One is because of the attacking upside. He's got 0.27 XGI per 90, which for a defender is massive. And he does have that extra double game week as well. And it kind of balances out the hit a little bit. I'm looking at definitely making a midfield move too. If I bring in Porro, I give myself a bit more of a chance of paying off the hit immediately because he does have the double game week. Now, looking at the fixture for Newcastle, Sheffield United at home is a fantastic opportunity for them to keep a clean sheet and for attacking returns maybe for Fabian Schär as well. So maybe I need to be not so blinkered by the fact it's a double game week for Spurs, especially when you look at the double itself of Arsenal and Chelsea. It's not fantastic. you're not really expecting clean sheets there. But all he needs is one goal, one assist, something from that double, and all of a sudden that will pay off the hit. Whereas with Shah, it only takes a very small error from Newcastle to concede a goal, and therefore it's very unlikely that he will pay off the hit. He's got lower attacking upside, so it's a 1 in 10 shot of him getting a goal or an assist, basically, looking at the data. So I think overall, maybe I prefer Porro, but I'm not ruling out Fabian Schär, and I could definitely still have a change of heart before the deadline. Okay, now looking at midfield moves, and one player is going to be probably sold this week. I'm not going to say definitely, because I never want to lock myself into moves, even on a Friday at this point, and especially when it's a move as big as selling Mo Salah ahead of game week 35. Now, if we take a look at the fixtures before discussing his form, West Ham away, Tottenham at home, and then Wolves away on the last day, all objectively good fixtures from an attacking point of view. Mo Salah has great data, 1.02 XGI per 90. I think that's second best in FPL at the moment this season. And he is one of the best FPL picks from the last few seasons. And it's going to be tough to say goodbye to him now, especially when we know what he can do. He's been off the boil. He's been snatching at chances. He's not looked his best recently whatsoever, but he has still been getting those chances, and he's still been getting that data. And with Mo, all it takes is one penalty and all of a sudden he's hauling anyway. So there's always going to be risk selling Mo Salah. It's never going to be an easy decision. And especially the next two fixtures, I had initially planned holding on to him as a bit of a differential, whilst most wildcarders sell him. West Ham and Spurs, really porous defences. I do fancy him for goals in those two fixtures. But the fact of the matter is, he is snatching at chances at the moment, and there are at least two, if not three, other options I would like to have in my team that, even for a hit, they've got the double game week, all three of them, and have better fixtures and are less money, so I can start spreading the money around and building a really good 15 for the bench boost in game week 37. So overall, sadly, I think it is likely I'm going to be selling Mo Salah this week. And just for one moment, I'd like to reflect on how good an option he has been in recent seasons, because it's relatively likely, barring maybe bringing him back in for game week 38, that this could be the last time, certainly this season, that I own Mo Salah, and possibly the last time ever as well, because there is a chance that maybe he moves away from Liverpool in the summer. Obviously, we don't know that yet. But if he does, this could be the last time we ever have him in our teams. And it is a bit of a shame for him to go out on two blanks in a double game week in game week 34 for me. So it is a bit sad. Obviously, it's just a game. It doesn't really matter. But Mo has been a fantastic option. And I would like to have him on the last game of the season against Wolves at home. So if I can have some money in the bank to make that move for one free transfer, I will look at that as an option, even if it's for a little bit of sentimental reasons. He has been brilliant, but also moving beyond sentimental reasons, great data. He's still one of the best picks in the game. It's just for the money and not in the best form right now. Maybe you can look elsewhere. Now, moving on to the options that I'm considering, the two obvious ones are Bruno Fernandes and Anthony Gordon. Fernandes has been in a red-hot form recently, 2 goals in each of his last 2 games, 2 double-digit hauls in that time, obviously, as well. He's on penalties, great underlying data, 0.58, although not quite Mo Salah's, let's be honest. But also great fixtures now between now and the end of the season. Burnley at home, followed by Crystal Palace away, double of Arsenal and Newcastle, both at home, but obviously Arsenal are a good defence. And then Brighton away, who have just been shipping goals recently as well. So overall, Bruno, fantastic pick. But I do have Garnacho in my side already, so maybe that's a factor I need to consider. Maybe I don't want to pile too heavily into Man United. Anthony Gordon, even better fixtures, I would say. Sheffield United at home, Burnley away are just the 2 perfect fixtures right now, followed by a double that is objectively better than Man United's of Brighton at home, Man United away. And I would say that is better. Both of those teams leak goals, and Gordon has been in very good form recently. Brentford away from home last day of the season also isn't too bad either. So overall, I think Gordon makes a lot of sense too. And coming into this game week, Gordon was the one I had my eye on as a transfer. The problem is his data's not as good, he's not on penalties, and Bruno Fernandes's ownership is climbing very, very quickly right now, and understandably so, because he's in red-hot form. The problem for me is I do already have Garnacho. Do I want to risk having double Man United attack when they have been kind of up and down all season long? I'm not sure. But Bruno has been one of the consistent performers, especially over the last 8 or 9 game weeks, very, very consistently. So do I just want to say, you know what, forget the team, it's the asset that I'm owning and the asset that I want to be interested in. So one of these two is very likely to come in for Salah. The other option, if I really want to take a bit of a gamble, a bit of a risk that I could consider, is KDB. Now, KDB, good underlying data as well. Obviously, good fixtures between now and the end of the season and has that double game week in 37 too. But he is a bit more money. He isn't quite as nailed for minutes as Bruno or Gordon. So it would be a risk. But we all have good memories of KDB. Attacking upside in a double game week is massive. And he usually comes in handy and usually hits really good form in the back few fixtures of a season as Man City, are chasing down a title. And of course they are doing so once again. So I think KDB comes into it for me. I am more likely to look at Bruno and Gordon at this point in time. And maybe because I've already got Garnacho, who is doing all right, not as good as Bruno, but he is doing okay. Because I've got him in my team already, maybe I just want to cover my bases with Gordon first and then maybe look at Bruno as an option later down the line. So finally, let's take a look at my team selection for game week 35 as it stands. Now, as usual, not locked in yet. And as I've already discussed, there are a lot of things that I'm still considering between the two options for both defence and midfield. But I think it is likely that the players to go will be Mo Salah and one of Lascelles or Udogie. Now, in this structure, I've put in the moves for Udogie out to Porro and Salah out to Gordon. Now, that gives me a lot of money in the bank, 9.2 to be exact. And obviously, that would be taking a hit, but only a -4. I don't think it's massive this week. And if it gets me closer to a good bench boost side in 37, I think chasing the upside on both of those picks is a decent excuse to take the hit right now and sort out a couple of issues. Now, in this starting 11, Gusto is starting. I think there's a pretty low chance of him being fit for the double game week. So maybe just to be on the safe side, I put Gabriel in to start instead of Gusto. But we'll hopefully hear something from Poch in the press conference. And if Gusto sounds like he's going to be ready for Aston Villa, then maybe I'll just start him ahead of Gabriel anyway. Either way, I now have another defensive option that is fit and ready to start, hopefully, as long as we get good news on Porro, that I can hopefully rely on to make sure that I do have a full playing 11. Now, moving into midfield, I've put in Gordon for Mo Salah at the moment. I could look at Bruno. I could look at KDB, of course, as well, as I already discussed. But I think because I've got Foden and Garnacho anyway, it's just a bit more of covering the bases. And Gordon has been fantastic. They've got brilliant fixtures. And I do really like that Sheffield United game. I think that is a better game than Man United at home to Burnley at this point in time. And I think Burnley obviously are hanging on hope that they could get out of the relegation zone. They're not a million miles out of it. So they're going to be fighting tooth and nail, whereas Sheffield United probably are a team that have a much higher likelihood of downing tools a little bit. And I want to take that chance by having as much Newcastle exposure from an attacking point of view as possible. So Gordon, I think, makes a lot of sense. I would like Bruno as well. And maybe there's an argument to say, okay, if I'm really wanting to roll the dice, I could even take a -8 and sell Garnacho for Bruno if I'm really convinced that Bruno can outscore Garnacho by 4 points or more, rather, between now and the end of the season. But Garnacho himself hasn't been in bad form, so I think it is a risk. And for a hit, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that's really something that is likely to pay off. Although maybe it's time to take a few risks. I'm not sure at this point, but I think a -4 is most likely. Porro in for Udogie is probably my move at the moment in defence, and in midfield it's Gordon in for Salah. If we get bad news on Porro and he's not going to be available for Arsenal, then it's an easy move. Instead of him in for Udogie, I'll probably leave Udogie on the bench, replace Lascelles for Fabian Schär instead, give myself a Newcastle triple up at home to Sheffield United, That's locked in that move. And then the following week, I can look at either bringing in Porro, or I can look at a Man City defender for a doggy instead. So overall, I think with a -4, I can make my side look pretty decent. Throw the captaincy on Palmer as well, who is yellow flagged, but as I've mentioned, hopefully won't become the deadline. And if Haaland doesn't start against Nottingham Forest, João Pedro away at Bournemouth, not amazing, but it's okay. It's good enough that it's probably not worth me taking another move to strengthen my bench just on the off chance Haaland doesn't start. And I'm not going to be selling Haaland at this point unless we hear that he's got a season-ending injury, which doesn't look likely at all at this moment in time. So generally speaking, -4 will take me a little bit further away from the top 100k, but I'm hoping it sets me up a little bit better for the bench boost and gives me enough upside that I can start chasing down that top 100k rank. And fingers crossed, I can get inside pretty quickly and start chasing something like 50, maybe even 25k if I'm really, really lucky. Not being the best season right now, but hopefully we can finish on a respectable rank. In the meantime, let me know any questions you've got in the comments below ahead of the deadline, and I'll try and answer them all before we lock our teams in. Good luck in game week 35, and hopefully I'll see you on the channel again as we chase down a good game week rank in game week 36 as well.